The blue light of the emergency notification flashed across Lieutenant Colonel Kim's office 3 times before he noticed it. He had been reviewing defense protocols, standard procedure since Earth made first contact with alien civilizations 5 years ago. "What now?" he muttered, tapping the screen. The message was brief. "Unknown transmission incoming. Galactic Council origin. Central Command requesting your presence immediately." Kim grabbed his uniform jacket and hurried down the corridor. Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council had been cautious but stable. An unexpected transmission wasn't necessarily trouble, but it wasn't usually good news either. When he entered Central Command, Director Park was already there, her usually calm face tight with tension. Several other military and civilian leaders filled the room, talking in low, urgent voices. "They're requesting a formal audience," Park told him. "Full diplomatic protocol." Before Kim could respond, the main screen flickered. Everyone fell silent as the connection established. The alien that appeared made Kim's breath catch, despite his years of experience with extraterrestrial life. It was a 6-limbed being with scales that shifted colors as it moved, deep blues fading to purples and greens. 2 primary eyes focused on the camera, while 4 smaller eyes scanned continuously. "I am High Judge Ralax of the Galactic Council Sentient Rights Division," the alien began, its translator producing perfect English. "I speak with the authority of the Council of 500 Worlds." Director Park stepped forward. "Earth welcomes your communication, High Judge. I am Director Park of Earth's Interstellar Relations Department." The alien scales darkened to a deep purple. "This is not a welcome communication, Director. After extensive deliberation, the Council has reached a judgment regarding your species." Kim felt a chill run through the room. Earth had no pending cases with the Council, at least none they knew about. "Earth is hereby charged with Class 4 sentient rights violations based on evidence collected from your own broadcasts," the alien announced. "The Galactic Council has reviewed thousands of your entertainment transmissions showing widespread torture, murder, and warfare." A confused murmur spread through the room. Director Park frowned deeply. "High Judge, I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding," she said. "The broadcasts you refer to must be our entertainment programming. Movies, television shows, games. These portray fictional events, not real ones." "We are not fools, Director," the alien responded, scales flashing red briefly. "Your attempts at deception only confirm your guilt. Our experts have analyzed over 5,000 distinct broadcasts. The evidence is overwhelming." Kim stepped forward. "Sir, permission to explain." Park nodded. "High Judge," Kim began, "humans create stories, fictional narratives, for entertainment. These stories often contain conflict and sometimes violence, but they are not real events. They are performed by actors or created with computer graphics." The alien's smaller eyes blinked rapidly. "You claim that these detailed recordings of torture, warfare, and killing are merely pretend." "Exactly," Park said, hope in her voice. "This is the most offensive excuse we have ever encountered," the alien replied coldly. "You broadcast your atrocities openly, then claim they are entertainment. The Council finds this defense both insulting and disturbing. Those are movies. Fiction," shouted Director Park, slamming her fist on the conference table. "They aren't real events." For the next 12 hours, Earth's representatives tried every possible explanation. They sent examples of movie sets, behind-the-scenes footage, special effects demonstrations. They arranged video calls with famous actors who died in multiple films. They explained the concepts of fiction, drama, and storytelling. The Council remained unmoved. To them, the idea of creating realistic depictions of suffering for entertainment was, if possible, even more disturbing than if the events had been real. On the second day, a new transmission arrived. The Council had voted. Earth was guilty. As punishment for your crimes and to prevent further violations, Earth will be isolated until humanity demonstrates moral reformation. announced High Judge Relax. "You have 24 hours to recall any citizens beyond your solar system." "This is outrageous," Park protested. "You can't just cut us off from interstellar travel and communication. We have treaties, trade agreements." "All now void," the alien interrupted. "The judgment is final." When the transmission ended, chaos erupted in Central Command. Emergency calls went out to all human ships and colonies, but with only a few hundred humans beyond the Sol system, most on scientific or diplomatic missions, there was no way to recall everyone in time. The final hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Kim coordinated with military ships to retrieve as many off-world personnel as possible. Park tried desperately to appeal to alien allies, only to find most unwilling to challenge a council judgment. 3 days after the first transmission, it happened. Kim stood at the observatory window as a shimmering energy barrier materialized around the entire Sol system. It started as a faint blue glow that quickly strengthened into an impenetrable wall. The few ships still approaching Earth made it through just before the barrier sealed completely. "How is this even possible?" whispered one of the scientists beside him. "The energy requirements to quarantine an entire star system." "The Council has technologies we've barely glimpsed," Kim replied grimly. Back in Central Command, the final count came in. 87 humans remained trapped beyond the barrier, scattered across 23 different worlds. Some were on research stations, others in diplomatic compounds. A few were simply travelers who had chosen the wrong time for their journey. Director Park stared at the list of names, her face ashen. "We abandoned them." "We didn't abandon anyone," Kim said firmly. "We'll find a way through this barrier. We'll bring them home." "And if we can't?" she asked. Kim had no answer. Outside, the barrier shimmered like a beautiful, deadly prison wall, cutting Earth off from the stars based on a tragic misunderstanding. Humanity now faced isolation in a suddenly much smaller universe, while a handful of their people were stranded as unwelcome aliens in a galaxy that had judged them monsters. The smell of alien spices made Dr. Lee's nose itch, but she had learned to control her reactions. Any sign of discomfort, any hint that she was different, could bring unwanted attention. 6 months on Nexus 9 had taught her caution above all else. She kept her eyes down as she moved through the crowded market. The worn trader's coat she had purchased from a Velian junk dealer helped her blend in, its deep hood shadowing her all-too-human features. Around her, dozens of alien species bartered and shouted, and moved in the controlled chaos of the galaxy's busiest trading hub. Fresh water fruits. Get your water fruits. Premium oxygen filters. Tested on 17 atmospheres. Information. Secrets for sale. Cheap today only. Lee ignored them all, her pace steady but unhurried. The meeting point was just ahead. A small food stall that specialized in heated protein cubes that, thankfully, humans could eat without getting sick. She spotted Ta already seated in the corner. He wore the uniform of a maintenance worker, complete with tool belt and identification badge. The badge was fake, of course, but it was good enough to get him access to maintenance tunnels throughout the station. Lee ordered a small plate of protein cubes and sat across from him. "You're late," he said quietly, not looking up from his meal. "Security checkpoints on level 4, she replied. "They're scanning for Earth tech again." Ta nodded, still not making eye contact. They had worked together for 3 years on the Jupiter research station before the quarantine. Now they were 2 of only 7 humans on Nexus 9, part of the scattered remnants of humanity left stranded when the barrier went up around Sol. "The network found something," whispered Ta, sliding a small data chip under his plate toward her. The judgment wasn't about fictional violence at all. Lee felt her heart speed up, but kept her face neutral. The network was their name for the loose alliance of stranded humans across different worlds. Communication was difficult and dangerous. Human communication devices were now illegal in most systems, but they had found ways to stay connected. "Eat your food," Ta reminded her gently. "We're just 2 workers having lunch." She forced herself to take a bite of the bland protein cube. How reliable is the source? Very. It came from June on Galactic Central. He accessed council archives through his employer's terminals. Lee nodded slightly. June had been a translator at the council headquarters when the quarantine happened. Unlike most humans, he hadn't lost his position. His employer had too much invested in his specialized language skills. "I'll see you at the usual place," Ta said, standing up. 2 hours. After finishing her meal, Lee wandered through the market for another 30 minutes, making sure she wasn't followed. Eventually, she made her way to the lowest residential sector, where the air recyclers were noisy and inefficient. Here, in the cheapest habitation blocks, questions weren't asked as long as rent was paid. Her room was small, barely 4 meters square, with a sleeping pad, hygiene station, and food synthesizer that produced nothing but nutrient paste. But it was anonymous, and anonymity was survival now. 2 hours later, Tai arrived with a portable data reader hidden inside a broken air filter. Lee locked the door and activated the small signal jammer she had built from parts stolen from the station's waste reclamation center. "It will only give us 10 minutes before station security notices the interference," she warned. Ta nodded and inserted the data chip. The reader flickered to life, displaying files and images. "This is council intelligence from before the judgment," he explained. "Internal communications from the Zenthian delegation." Lee leaned forward, trying to make sense of the alien text and diagrams. "What am I looking at?" "Evidence of a conspiracy," Ta said, his voice tight with anger. "The Zenthians deliberately selected the most violent human entertainment, edited it to remove any context, showing it was fiction, and presented it to the council as documentary evidence." He scrolled to another file. "Look here, internal Zenthian reports analyzing Earth's mineral resources, especially our heavy metals and rare earth elements. And here," he pointed to a series of diagrams, "preliminary plans for mining operations in the Sol system." Lee felt cold despite the room's stuffiness. "They set us up. They manipulated the council to quarantine Earth so they could take our resources." "Exactly." Ta switched to another file, showing massive ships with distinctive Zenthian design. "These are mining vessels, already being prepared for deployment to Sol. Once they break through the barrier, which apparently only keeps things in, not out, they'll start stripping the outer planets first." "We need to warn home," said Lee, watching recordings of Zenthian mining ships preparing for deployment to Sol, "and find others like us." Ta shut down the reader as the jammer began to beep, warning that its effectiveness was fading. "How?" he asked, frustration clear in his voice. "No communication gets through the barrier." "I don't know yet," Lee admitted, "but there are 85 other humans out here with us. Someone must have an idea." A loud bang on her door made them both freeze. "Station security. Open up." Lee's eyes met Ta's in panic. They had been discovered. "The reader," she hissed. "Hide it." As Ta scrambled to conceal their only evidence, Lee moved toward the door, mind racing. Beyond it was likely arrest, maybe worse. Humans had no rights in council space now. Some had already disappeared without explanation. Yet they held crucial information, proof that could potentially save Earth from being plundered. Somehow, they needed to survive, to spread the word to other humans, and find a way to break through the greatest technological barrier ever created. The pounding came again, harder this time. "Last warning. Open this door immediately." Lee took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, the scattered remnants of humanity now faced a race against time, not just to get home, but to save it. Dr. Song hadn't slept in 3 days. His small office, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, was littered with empty coffee cups and crumpled papers covered in complex equations. For 6 months, he had studied the barrier that imprisoned Earth, testing every theory he could imagine. Today was different. Today, something had clicked. "It's not a physical barrier at all," he whispered to himself, staring at the simulation running on his computer. The holographic display showed energy patterns that pulsed and shifted around a model of Earth's solar system. It's a field of quantum probability manipulation. He pressed a button on his desk. Admiral Choi, please come to Lab 4 immediately. I found something. 15 minutes later, Admiral Choi entered the lab. She was a tall woman with stern features that rarely showed emotion, but even she couldn't hide her exhaustion. 6 months of leading Earth's scientific response to the quarantine had taken its toll. This better be important, Dr. Song, she said. I have 17 other projects needing my attention today. Dr. Song gestured to his simulation. Look at this. I've been analyzing the energy readings from our probe tests. The barrier doesn't destroy our ships or probes when they try to exit the system. It redirects them. We know this already, Admiral Choi said, impatience in her voice. Yes, but how it does it is the key. Dr. Song pulled up a new set of data. The barrier operates on quantum entanglement principles. It creates a field where probability itself is altered. When our ships try to leave, the barrier shifts quantum probability so that they always remain within our solar system, no matter which direction they travel. Admiral Choi leaned closer to the display. And this helps us how? Dr. Song smiled for the first time in weeks. Because quantum entanglement works both ways. If we can create a counterfield that temporarily disrupts the entanglement points, we might be able to create a window, a brief opening in the barrier. The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. Are you certain? Theoretically, yes. The math supports it. He gestured to his equations. We would need to build a massive disruptor array, larger than anything we've constructed before. And the power requirements would be enormous. Admiral Choi stared at the data for a long moment, then straightened her shoulders. Tell me what you need. 3 weeks later, Project Homecoming was born. A massive underwater facility expanded beneath the Pacific Ocean, hidden from orbital observation. Resources from around the world poured in as humans united with a single purpose: breaking free. Dr. Song led a team of 50 scientists working in shifts around the clock. They built a circular array of quantum disruptors, each the size of a small car, arranged in a pattern that matched the mathematical structure of the barrier itself. The theory is simple, Dr. Song explained during one briefing. We'll create a counter-resonance field that will briefly destabilize the barrier's quantum matrix. We only need a disruption of a few seconds to test if the concept works. And if it does? Asked one of the military observers. Then we scale up, Admiral Choi answered firmly. We build bigger arrays, create longer disruptions, and eventually send ships through. On a cold morning, 7 months after Earth's quarantine began, the disruptor array was finally ready. Dr. Song stood at the control station, surrounded by his team and military observers. Admiral Choi watched from a position near the door, her face revealing nothing of her thoughts. Begin power-up sequence, Dr. Song ordered. Around the room, technicians called out readings as the massive generators beneath the facility roared to life. The lights dimmed briefly as power was redirected to the array. Power at 60% and rising, a technician reported. Quantum alignment stable, called another. Dr. Song watched the readouts carefully. Everything was proceeding according to his calculations, but this was untested technology based on theories about alien science. Anything could happen. Power at 90%. Array fully charged. Dr. Song looked to Admiral Choi, who gave a single nod. This was it. Months of work, Earth's resources, humanity's hope, all riding on this moment. 3, 2, 1. Activate, called Song. He pressed the large red button on his console. For a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then a low humming filled the room, rising in pitch until it was almost painful to hear. The lights flickered, and several screens went dark. Status report, Admiral Choi demanded. Before anyone could answer, a massive surge of energy pulsed through the array. The floor trembled, and warning alarms blared throughout the facility. Energy feedback loop. A technician shouted. The barrier is reflecting our pulse back at us. "Shut it down," Dr. Song ordered, frantically working his controls. But it was too late. The disruptor array released a massive electromagnetic pulse that shot upward through the ocean and into space. The lights in the facility went completely dark. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in red light. "Damage report," Admiral Choi demanded. "The array is fried," one technician said. "Complete burnout of the main emitters." Dr. Song stared at his screens in shock. The barrier, it responded to our pulse. Instead of disrupting it, we fed it somehow. "So we failed," Admiral Choi stated flatly. Dr. Song was about to agree when one of the monitoring stations began beeping. A young scientist called out, "I'm detecting unusual energy patterns in the barrier. It's rippling." Everyone turned to the main screen, which showed the barrier surrounding Earth. Usually stable and barely visible, it now pulsed with waves of energy spreading outward like ripples in a pond. "What's happening?" Admiral Choi asked. Dr. Song moved to the monitoring station, studying the readings with growing amazement. "Our pulse didn't break through the barrier, it transformed it. We've somehow amplified Earth's electromagnetic signature. We're broadcasting at a quantum level." "Broadcasting what?" someone asked. "Everything," Dr. Song whispered. "Our communications, our energy signatures, a quantum echo of Earth itself." What none of them knew, as they stared at the failed experiment, was that this quantum pulse was traveling faster and farther than they could have imagined. It spread through the barrier and beyond, carrying the unique signature of human technology with it. In distant worlds across the galaxy, stranded humans looked up in shock as their carefully hidden Earth devices briefly surged with energy. Personal communicators, data tablets, medical scanners, anything of Earth origin briefly glowed with power before returning to normal. On Nexus 9, Dr. Lee stared at her suddenly activated emergency beacon in wonder. On Galactic Central, Jun watched his translator device reset itself. Across 17 worlds, 87 humans felt something they had begun to lose. Hope. Earth was fighting back. Lee pressed herself against the cold wall as a security drone floated past. The Council headquarters on Galactic Central was supposedly the most secure building in the galaxy. Yet here she was, deep in its service corridors, thanks to a maintenance worker named Han. 3 weeks had passed since the strange energy pulse had activated her Earth devices. That same pulse had affected Han's cleaning robot, which contained parts from an old Earth vacuum system. The malfunction had brought them together. Han discovering she was human when he traced the signal, and Lee discovering he had no love for the Council. "The archives are this way," whispered Han, his four-fingered hand beckoning her forward. His skin was a pale blue in the dim emergency lighting of the maintenance tunnel. "We must hurry. Shift change in 20 minutes." Lee followed him through a maze of narrow passages that ran behind the grand halls where Council representatives debated the fate of worlds. Months of hiding had made her thin, but also quick and quiet. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as they paused at a junction. It wasn't the first time she'd asked, but his answer kept changing. "The Council claims to stand for justice," Han replied, checking a small screen on his wrist. "Yet I clean their private chambers. I hear what they say when no one is supposed to be listening." His large eyes blinked slowly. "What they did to your world was wrong." They continued until they reached a small maintenance door. Han placed his hand on the scanner. "This leads to the archive service area," he explained, "where they store physical records too sensitive for the network. My clearance gets us in, but we'll have only 15 minutes before the system flags an unauthorized presence." The door slid open silently. They entered a vast room filled with rows of storage units. The air was cool and dry to preserve the contents. "Zenthian communications will be in Section 47B, Han said. "I'll watch the door." Lee moved quickly through the rows, counting sections. When she reached 47B, she found thousands of small crystal storage cubes, each containing years of diplomatic communications. She pulled out a small scanner she had built from salvaged parts and began searching for Earth-related data. The scanner beeped softly as it found matches. Lee carefully removed 3 crystal cubes and plugged them into her reader. Text and images filled the small screen. Messages between Zenthian officials dating back 5 years. What she read made her blood run cold. Project Human Resources was the name of their operation. The Zenthians had been studying Earth broadcasts since first contact, analyzing our culture, technology, and especially our entertainment. They had specially edited thousands of hours of human fiction, removing opening credits, cutting between scenes of violence from different sources, removing context that showed the events were staged. One message was particularly damning. The Council's moral authority makes them predictable. When presented with evidence of such widespread violence, they will have no choice but to quarantine. Resource extraction can begin immediately thereafter. Another file contained detailed surveys of the Sol system's resources, rare metals, gases, and minerals that the Zenthian Empire desperately needed for their expansion. 3 minutes. Han mourned from the door. Lee worked frantically, copying as much data as she could to her portable device. The final file she accessed showed the most disturbing detail of all. The barrier technology had been developed by the Zenthians themselves and provided to the Council specifically for Earth's quarantine. "We need to go now," Han insisted as alarms began to sound in distant corridors. Lee disconnected her device and replaced the crystal cubes. They slipped back into the maintenance tunnels just as security forces entered the archive room. For the next week, Lee analyzed the stolen data from the safety of a hidden room provided by Han. Using the encrypted communication system the human network had developed, she shared her findings with the scattered humans across the galaxy. They studied our broadcasts, selected the most violent fictional content, and presented it as documentary evidence. Lee told the growing network of stranded humans during an emergency meeting. "We were set up from the beginning." "But why?" asked a human diplomat stranded on Rigel Prime. "What do they gain?" "Everything," Lee replied, sharing the resource maps. "The Sol system contains concentrations of elements the Zenthians need for their technology. With Earth quarantined, they can mine our entire system without opposition." "Have they started?" someone else asked. "Not yet," answered Jun, who still worked as a translator at Council headquarters. "According to schedules I've accessed, the first mining ships are preparing to depart next month." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from Tai on Nexus 9. Breaking news. Earth ships detected beyond the barrier. The humans fell silent as Tai shared a grainy video showing a small fleet of Earth vessels emerging from what appeared to be a temporary hole in the quarantine barrier. "How is this possible?" Lee whispered. "They did it," said Jun with wonder in his voice. "They broke through." 2 days later, Lee received a secure transmission directly from one of the Earth ships. Admiral Choi's flagship, Vindication, had established orbit around a small moon in the Proxima system and was requesting contact with any Earth citizens. The human network scrambled to respond. Within hours, Lee and 3 other humans had secured transport to Proxima. When Lee stepped aboard the Vindication, she could barely contain her emotions. The ship smelled like Earth, the air circulation, the materials, even the food. Admiral Choi greeted them personally. "Dr. Lee, your network has been invaluable. The pulse that reached you was actually an accident, an experiment gone wrong, but it helped us locate our people." "We have evidence," Lee said, handing over her data device. "The Zenthians framed Earth. They manipulated the Council to gain access to our resources." Admiral Choi's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the files. "This confirms our suspicions. We need to present this to the Council directly." "Some will listen," Lee said, "but the Zenthians have bought influence with many Council races." Within days, representatives from Earth met with Council members willing to hear their case. The evidence was irrefutable: detailed plans spanning years, internal communications admitting to the deception, and resource maps showing exactly what the Zenthians stood to gain. Several council races expressed shock and outrage at being manipulated. The Velians and Proxians immediately called for the quarantine to be lifted, but the dominant factions, those with close ties to Zenthian trade, refused to acknowledge the evidence or reverse the judgment. "This changes nothing," announced the High Judge, now revealed to be heavily influenced by Zenthian wealth. "The quarantine stands." As the diplomatic impasse continued, the Zenthians realized their plot was being exposed. Their response was swift and brutal. A fleet of warships, disguised as trade vessels, launched simultaneous attacks on Earth's disruptor facilities that had been established on several outer moons of the Sol system. The first facility on Titan was destroyed before anyone realized what was happening. The second, on Europa, managed to send a warning before it too was obliterated. The conflict that the Zenthians had falsely accused humanity of had now become real, started by the very accusers themselves. The Zenthian warships approached Earth with supreme confidence. Their commander, Fleet Lord Vizix, viewed the tactical display with satisfaction. His 27 battlecruisers would easily overwhelm any defenses the quarantined humans might have developed. "Begin barrier penetration sequence," he ordered, his scaled skin shimmering with anticipation. "Remember, we want their infrastructure intact. Disable their weapons systems only." The lead ships activated the special transmitters that would allow them to pass through the quarantine barrier. This technology, kept secret from the Council, had been part of the Zenthian plan from the beginning. The barrier was designed to keep humans in, not others out. As the Zenthian fleet passed through the shimmering wall, they prepared for minimal resistance. Intelligence suggested Earth had only a small planetary defense force before the quarantine. They were wrong. On the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Vindication, Admiral Choi watched the enemy ships emerge from the barrier. Her face remained calm, though inside her heart pounded. This was the moment Earth had been preparing for since they discovered the true purpose of the quarantine. "They're through the barrier," her tactical officer reported. 27 ships, heavy cruiser class. "Right on schedule," Choi said. She opened a channel to the rest of the Earth fleet, 60 vessels hiding in formation behind Earth's moon. "All ships, this is Admiral Choi. Execute Operation Reckoning." She turned to her weapons officer. "All batteries, defensive pattern Omega." Across Earth's orbit, hidden defense platforms suddenly activated. These platforms, built using technology reverse-engineered from study of the barrier itself, projected energy fields that rippled like water as Zenthian weapons fire struck them. On the Zenthian command ship, Fleet Lord Vizix stared in disbelief as his first volley dissipated harmlessly against Earth's defenses. "Impossible," he hissed. "Their technology was nowhere near this advanced 6 months ago." "Sir, we're detecting multiple ships emerging from behind their moon," his sensor officer reported, voice tight with alarm. Before Vizix could respond, Earth's counterattack began. The human fleet emerged from hiding, weapons blazing. The Zenthian ships found themselves caught in a perfectly executed trap. "Their shields are absorbing our energy weapons," the Zenthian weapons officer reported. Vizix slammed his fist on his command chair. "Switch to projectile weapons. They can't have defenses against everything." But the humans had prepared for this too. Small, fast interceptor ships darted between the larger vessels, shooting down incoming projectiles before they could reach their targets. As the space battle raged around Earth, something even more important was happening across the galaxy. On 17 different worlds, scattered humans carried out a coordinated plan months in the making. In each location, teams of humans and their alien allies infiltrated Zenthian communication hubs. These facilities connected the vast Zenthian Empire to its forces and colonies. On Nexus 9, Dr. Li and Ta led one such team. They had spent weeks planning this mission, studying the facility's security patterns and weaknesses. "The main control room is just ahead," Ta whispered as they crawled through a ventilation shaft. "Remember, we only need to upload the virus to the main system. It will do the rest." Lee nodded, clutching the small data device that contained a program designed to exploit a weakness in Zenthian communication protocols. Similar devices were being deployed across the galaxy at exactly the same time. When they reached the control room, Lee created a distraction by triggering a small fire in a nearby storage area. As the Zenthian operators rushed to respond, Ta slipped in and connected their device to the main console. "Upload complete," he said moments later. "Let's go." They escaped just as the system began to malfunction. Across the galaxy, the same scene played out at every major Zenthian communication hub. One by one, their networks experienced cascading failures. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Council headquarters, an emergency session had been called to address the sudden conflict in the Sol system. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered in the Great Chamber, arguing heatedly about how to respond. The Zenthian ambassador was in the middle of a passionate speech, defending his empire's actions, when the chamber doors burst open. Commander Jin of Earth's diplomatic corps strode in, flanked by representatives from 3 council races who had seen the evidence and switched their allegiance. Jin had spent the last week on a dangerous mission, personally carrying copies of the evidence to influential council members. "This session will pause immediately," announced the Velian representative, using her position as a senior council member to take control. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" demanded the High Judge, whose Zenthian connections were still unknown to most. Commander Jin stepped forward, her uniform clean and pressed despite her difficult journey. "Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Council, you have been deceived," she announced, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. "Humanity did not commit the crimes we were accused of. We were framed by those who coveted our resources." The chamber erupted in shouts and questions. Jin raised her hand, and her allies activated a projection system that displayed the evidence for all to see. "These are original Zenthian communications," Jin explained as messages appeared in the air for all to see. "They document a deliberate plan to manipulate the Council into quarantining Earth so they could plunder our system's resources." The recordings played for all to see, Zenthian officials discussing how to edit human entertainment to remove context, how to present it as evidence, and most damning of all, detailed plans for mining operations in the Sol system. "The barrier technology itself was provided by the Zenthians," Jin continued. "A technology they can pass through at will, as they have demonstrated by their unprovoked attack on Earth today." The Zenthian ambassador tried to object, but new information was arriving. Reports of the battle at Earth, where the Zenthian fleet was being decisively defeated, and reports of communication failures throughout Zenthian space. 3 major council races immediately stood and formally withdrew their support for the quarantine. Others quickly followed. The High Judge tried to maintain order, but his authority was crumbling as his Zenthian connections became obvious to all. "I call for an immediate vote to lift the quarantine of Earth," announced the Proxian representative, a longtime advocate for fair treatment of emerging species. The vote was overwhelming. Within hours, the Council sent the command codes that would deactivate the barrier technology. After 8 months of isolation, Earth was free. The barrier fell with little ceremony. The shimmering wall simply faded away, leaving the stars clear and accessible once more. Earth ships moved outward, not in vengeance, but in determination to establish a new order. The Zenthian fleet at Earth surrendered once they realized their empire's communication network had collapsed. Fleet Lord Vizix was taken into custody to stand trial for war crimes. In the following weeks, the Galactic Council underwent its most significant restructuring in 1,000 years. The influence of wealth was reduced, and new checks and balances were implemented to prevent a single species from manipulating the system again. Humanity took its rightful place among the stars, not as the monsters they were painted to be, but as a race that would not tolerate injustice, even on a galactic scale. Dr. Lee stood on the observation deck of the Vindication as it prepared to return to Earth. After nearly a year in exile, she was going home. Beside her stood Tai, Han, and several other aliens who had helped reveal the truth. "What will you do now?" Han asked, his large eyes reflecting the starlight. Lee smiled. First, I'm going to see my family. Then, I think humanity has a lot of work to do. We need to make sure nothing like this ever happens again, to us or any other species. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Admiral Choi joined them. The Council has offered humanity a permanent seat, she told Lee. They want someone who experienced both sides of this conflict, someone who understands what it means to be truly alien, yet fights for justice regardless of species. Lee looked at her in surprise. You mean me? Admiral Choi nodded. If you accept. As the blue-green planet of her birth filled the window, Lee made her decision. The stars had tested humanity, and humanity had proven itself worthy. Now it was time to ensure the galaxy became a place of truth and justice for all sentient beings. The end.